Modern cars are absolute trash. They're built to break the second your warranty expires, so you'll go buy another one. But it wasn't always like this. Before the accountants took over, Australia built tanks masquerading as family cars, machines that have spent 40 years in the sun and still refuse to die. These are the 12 Australian cars that will actually outlive you, and number 1 is so unkillable it's basically illegal. Before there was a Holden culture, there was a stubby little battleship that rolled out of Fisherman's Bend in 1948 and told the world Australia could build its own car. The FX was not glamorous, not fast, and not comfortable, but it was honest, simple, and tough, in the way only a completely unambitious machine can be. It sits at number 12 because drum brakes, 6-volt electrics, and a cooling system that needs babying are the reasons most survivors owe their existence to careful restoration rather than decades of daily abuse. None of that diminishes what the FX actually was, the original blueprint for the tough, simple, keep-it-running Australian car. Every entry above it on this list owes something to the template this little pioneer established back in 1948. The early Falcons had a serious reputation problem. The XK and XL models were American Falcons dropped into a country with no interest in going easy on them, and Australian roads revealed every weakness fast. Ford knew something had to change, so the XP went through a famous durability program at the Yang's proving ground that was less publicity and more survival test. The XP was the beginning of the solution rather than the solution itself, and that is the honest reason it sits at 11. Later, Falcons got stronger and better suited to fleet punishment, but this is the car that forced Ford to take Australian conditions seriously. It worked, and the Falcon's credibility came out intact. Without the XP surviving that test first, nothing higher on this list wearing a blue oval gets built. The EH gets its place here almost entirely because of what is hiding under the bonnet. When the EH arrived in 1963, it brought a new 6-cylinder engine with a 7-main bearing crankshaft. This was a big step up from the old Gray Motor's 4-bearing bottom end, reducing flex and wear and establishing a durability reputation that would carry Holden well into the next decade. The red motor is the hero here more than the whole car. The EH itself still had early 60s problems, rust, an agricultural 3-speed manual, and drum brakes that were already looking dated at launch. But the engine it introduced became one of the most trusted units ever fitted to an Australian car, powering Kingswoods, Toranas, and HQ Utes across a production run lasting well into the 70s. This is where that legend started. If you think the EH's red motor was tough, we are only getting warmed up. Still to come, a Chrysler drivetrain that seemed almost impossible to kill, a Commodore rescued by a Japanese engine, and a number 1 so stubbornly unbreakable it might outlive the people laughing at its styling. The AP6 Valiant arrived in 1965, carrying what is arguably the most unbreakable drivetrain ever offered to the Australian public, the 225 Slant 6 paired with the Torque Flight Automatic. The Slant 6 tilted at 30 degrees, mainly to allow a lower bonnet line and better intake packaging, while the simple, heavy-duty design gave it its near-indestructible reputation. The drivetrain deserves a higher spot on this list. What keeps it down here is the rest of the car. Body and trim parts are harder to source than Holden or Falcon equivalents, meaning keeping one on the road demands a level of commitment the mechanicals themselves never ask for. The engine and gearbox kept AP6 Valiants alive across regional Australia for 60 years and counting. Committed ownership is the only thing keeping this Valiant out of the top 8. The HZ Kingswood was the result of Holden spending the better part of a decade sorting out the big rear-wheel drive formula until they had something genuinely grown up. The proven 6s and V8s were carried over unchanged, but the HZ also brought radial-tuned suspension, delivering better handling without sacrificing the big wafting ride buyers expected. If you bypass the choked-down 70s emission setups and fix the typical body rust, you are left with greatness. This era represents the absolute peak of daily drivability for these classic rear-wheel drive cruisers. Get underneath a clean one though, and the mechanicals are simple, accessible, and almost cheerfully easy to work on. The kind of honest engineering that keeps a car alive for 50 years through nothing more than regular servicing and a dry shed. By the time the CM Valiant arrived in 1978, Chrysler in Australia was already on borrowed time, and the CM was gloriously old school even by the standards of the day. Big body, rear-wheel drive, Hemi 6 or V8 under the bonnet, and almost no unnecessary technology anywhere to ambush an unsuspecting owner. The one known weakness is camshaft end float, where the camshaft can migrate in its bearings and cause grief if ignored. It is a known quantity with a known fix, which in the world of old cars is practically reassuring. But Chrysler's exit from Australia meant the parts network never reached the depth of Holden or Ford support, and that is what holds it here. The car itself is tough enough to deserve higher. The supply chain simply is not. We are entering the serious end of Australian durability now. The next cars were not just bought by families. They were punished by police fleets, taxi operators, country drivers, and owners who treated servicing like an optional hobby. From here on, every car has a genuine case for being almost impossible to finish off. The VL Commodore earns its place here because of an engine not designed in Australia at all. After industrial action left Holden without a suitable unit, the Nissan RB30 Straight 6 arrived as a stopgap and immediately became one of the most celebrated power plants ever fitted to an Australian family car. Police fleets ran them hard, taxi operators ran them harder, and the reputation built itself. The engine is considerably more durable than the car surrounding it, and that gap is what keeps the VL here rather than higher. The body can rust, the trim ages poorly, and the electrics of that era were not Holden's finest work. The RB30's reputation is enormous and deserved, built through real-world punishment rather than press releases. If this list judged engines alone, the VL would be considerably higher. The XF Falcon earned its reputation the hard way by refusing to stop working regardless of what was asked of it. Fleets loved it, taxi operators loved it, country families loved it, and the 4.1-liter inline-six seemed content to do its job every day for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. More than 278,000 were built, and that says everything about working Australia's trust. The one thing keeping it out of the top four is the cooling system. Neglect the coolant, let the head gasket go, and an otherwise exceptional machine became an expensive problem. The top four either do not share that vulnerability or overcome it with such mechanical strength it barely registers. The XF belongs here, solidly, without argument, from anyone who has driven one across 3 states and filled up twice. The VS Commodore redefined what cheap and cheerful could mean in Australia. The 3.8-litre Ecotec V6 made more power and better economy than the VR engine it replaced, while the rear-wheel drive layout kept everything accessible. Plus, the sheer number on the road meant wrecking yards were running a permanent clearance sale on whatever a VS owner could ever need. The interior and panels feel thin against the drivetrain's apparent indestructibility, and the VS never quite built the mythological toughness aura of the top 3. What it does have is old-school simplicity, combined with a level of everyday reliability the earlier Holdens on this list could not quite match. But in practical keep-it-moving terms, it quietly outlasted most things people bought instead. A mechanically literate owner could keep one alive almost indefinitely on a genuinely modest budget. We are down to the final 3, and this is where the legends stop being debatable. One has an engine taxi drivers trusted for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. One became the backyard mechanic's dream, and the number 1 is the ugly duckling that secretly became one of the toughest Australian cars ever built. The BA Falcon might feel like the modern entry here, but it is over 20 years old, and the 4.0-litre Barra inline 6 has developed a durability reputation that puts it among the finest engines Australia ever produced. The Barra's one concession to mortality is the complexity of the electronics and fuel system. More moving parts than the older entries and more things that need attention as the kilometers stack up. That is the only thing keeping it off the top too. The drivetrain is arguably the strongest Australia ever sent down a production line. On a list about lasting forever, it earns its place at number 3 without much argument. The HQ Kingswood is close to the platonic ideal of a car built to last forever. Holden built nearly 500,000 of them between 1971 and 1974. Because of that, the parts culture is so comprehensive that sourcing almost any component today is straightforward, and the Holden 6s and V8s are well within reach of any home mechanic with a basic toolkit. One thing only keeps it off the top step, and that is rust. The HQ body is not immortal, and a neglected shell can reach a point where saving it stops making financial sense. A rust-free HQ has essentially indefinite survival potential. The drivetrain will keep going long after most people give up, but the body has to survive first, and that means the HQ rewards the attentive owner rather than the completely indifferent one. The AU Falcon has spent 25 years trying to escape its own reputation, and most of the damage comes from styling that divided the country so completely that the mechanical story never got the attention it deserved. Under the controversial body, Ford developed the Intech 6 into a reliable, low-maintenance unit with a parts network so deep that running costs became almost theoretical. What puts it at number 1 is not prestige, performance, or collector appeal. It has almost none of those things. What it has is a durable drivetrain, cheap parts, a rear-wheel drive layout to keep repair bills down, and a body that absorbs neglect and heat long after lesser cars give up. It is the automotive equivalent of a cockroach, and on a list about lasting forever, that is the highest compliment a car can get. Which old Australian car do you think was truly built to last forever? And if you enjoyed this countdown, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.